Let's move now to the conversation. It's a pleasure to me to welcome Arantxa Tapia, a member of our TCI Board of Advisors and Basque Minister of Economic Development, Sustainability and Environment. She's the minister of my home country, the Basque Country, one of the most industrialized regions in Europe and with a longer cluster policy in place. Arantxa has been lately appearing in media every now and then, as she has been in charge of communicating in coordination with her colleagues from the health department many of the necessary social restrictions to stop the spread of the coronavirus, and also communicating about the government support to the Basque companies in these difficult times. She has recently started a new mandate after our regional elections, and she has now added the environmental area to her portfolio. And we have invited her to talk today about how to move towards a green industrial policy and how to do it through clusters. So welcome, Arantxa.
Thank you very much. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this event. And it's a great pleasure and an honor to be here representing the Basque government. And as you have been saying, I'm on my third mandate in the Basque government. And it's an interesting opportunity to exchange ideas with all of you. Of course, as Patricia was telling us, the pandemic has changed a lot, and we are under a big crisis, economic crisis, caused by a health issue, not because other kind of problems. But it has only accelerated some processes that were taking place before the crisis. One is the climate and energy transition, and the second one is the technological transition. We were working with our clusters in both senses, but now I think that the crisis has accelerated the need to achieve all these goals. So nowadays in our department, we can work together with sustainability and digitalization as two faces of the same coin. So we are trying to introduce sustainability issues and climate change working and energy transition as part of our economic development, and to try to analyze how we can work together with both sides. So Europe has decided to work with an European Green Deal, and we agree with that vision. We need ecological transition and ecological transformation in our planet, but it has to do with our economy at the same time. They cannot be achieved isolated one from the other, but they have to work together. So above all, the Basque countries and European country and European region say that have a special high level of self-government. So we can establish which is going to be our which are going to be our political decisions related to industry development, and at the same time we can establish our fiscal policies. So it's so important to have the money, to collect the money, and at the same time to establish our policies. So our administration is convinced that the public-private administration and the public-private working together for years and years is the best way to work in this sense, and to have a competitive model. So we are strongly committed to sustainable development, but at the same time we feel and we believe that all the environmental criteria and the environmental goals do not have to be a barrier or a conditioner, but they have to be a competitive factor to create value and to create economy. So for this, our president has decided that all environmental issues and energy issues are going to be working together with industry, with of course innovation and research together in the same department. So the energy and climate change transformation together with digital revolution are going to be the key factors to have a new economy. As you were telling us, of course, we have to deal with reconstructing and transforming our competitiveness, transforming our industry based on our cluster policy. We have been working with a cluster policy for more than 30 years, but it's time to change a bit this cluster policy, I think, because our clusters have been working private, public sector, all together, but as in some way isolated one from the other. So it's time to work together and to be more, say, work with hybridization, because it's necessary to introduce environmental issues on our industry, on our manufacturing sector, to work with new materials, to introduce eco-design, to introduce a factor saying what are we going to do with the rubbish, with the dust, with everything that is coming from our manufacturing processes. What are we going to do with our environmental footprint? So introduce all these concepts in the manufacturing sector is something new for our industry. How are we going to work with two clusters? For instance, we have a manufacturing cluster and a climate cluster. So they are working isolated. How can they start working together, introducing concepts one in another? And digitalization. What are we going to do with ICTs, with everything related to new services, which have to do with manufacturing, with, of course, energy issues. So they have to start working together and working more horizontal than working on niches, working isolated. So nowadays, I think that our cluster policy has to change a bit and collaborate more than they have been collaborated. They have been collaborating on each cluster, but they have to work inter-cluster. They have to work in a better way. So we have to rebuild our competitiveness, starting from our strengths, of course, and we have some strengths, but we have a lot to do. So all the cluster policy has to be something special in our case, but has to help us to change our mind, to change the mind of our industry, and to help us to transform all the society and to introduce the transformation issues on our minds and on our ways of doing. We don't have time to lose. We are a very small region, a very small country, and society has to work together with us. It's an imperative, and social changes are here, and we have to respond to these changes in the best way we know. So this is the way we are starting to work nowadays, and I think that introducing all these fields together with, for instance, agricultural issues, new kinds of healthy foods, for instance, how we can work with environment in our agricultural area and industry, working all together will be the next step and the way to do things in our next future. So this is the way we are working now and the way we see our future in the Basque Country. Thank you very much. To be quite short in this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Arantxa. I have a couple of questions to you, and also if there are more questions from the audience, maybe we'll have time to raise them to you. One is the Basque clusters have been working last year in adapting their strategies by introducing the Sustainable Development Goals objectives. Can you tell us a little bit more about this approach?
Oh, yes. We are working with all these goals, starting from how our industry has to change in order to achieve all the goals that have been established. For instance, CO2 emissions. How are we going to work? Because we love talking about, for instance, electric vehicles, and we say, okay, an electric vehicle has no emissions. No, it has not direct emissions, but on all the manufacturing processes, we have a lot of emissions, and we have a big footprint of environmental footprint. So how can we work and introduce environmental issues, analyzing which kind of materials we are going to use, how much energy we are going to use, and we try to be very, very efficient. How can we introduce from the very beginning all these eco-design matters? And this will be part of each cluster. For instance, in this case, I was talking about the automotive sector, but all these goals have to be established in each cluster, and the way the cluster is working with the companies, the bigger companies and the smaller ones that are working for suppliers for the bigger ones.
Another question, what has been the response from firms cluster members to the changes in the role approach of the cluster organizations that you have introduced in the Basque Country?
Sorry, in the something?
The response from the members of the cluster, from the companies, okay, to the changes in the role and this approach, the new approach that you are mentioning of the cluster organizations that you have been introducing in the Basque Country.
Okay, the first answer was they were not very interested, because at the end of the day, this is more cost from the production point of view. But if we understand that part of the cost is environmental cost, and that it will be for our next generations, it's important to introduce all these concepts from the very beginning. So we say maybe it's in the beginning of the process will be some additional costs in the production, but it will be better and will be more effective. And if you are more competitive in the future, this will be better for your company, and you will be a better position in the global chain. So it's a future investment, or investment for the future more than immediate investment. So we are trying to convince them, and because of the pandemic and because of other issues that have happened here in the Basque Country, they are being convinced more now than they were maybe 1 year ago. So we are working on that. It's not easy, but we are working on that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Arantxa, for being with us. We invite you to join us for the next conversation on policy making, also with 4 experts from the TCI network. But thank you very much, and see you in the next conversation of the TCI Board of Advisors.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tricia.
So here we have Cecilia Johansson from Sweden, Peter Keller from Hungary, Mirjana Prica from Australia, and Rasmus Beck from Metropole Ruhr in Germany. And we are going to tackle with them also 2 questions. What is the main support that clusters will need in the coming month? This is the first question that I will do them. The second one is, what are the challenges ahead from a policy perspective? Let's start with Cecilia. Cecilia, hello. What do you think the main support that clusters will need in the coming months is?
Yes, hello. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, in the next month, I think it's very important that the cluster feel that they have support from the governmental level, and that they understand that because they have an extremely big role in the crisis and the pandemic. And from a policy level, I also believe it's extremely important that we listen to the clusters even better, because that's our cluster organizations, I must say, because they are the one that have the direct contact with the companies and understand the companies' needs better than anyone else. But some regions in Sweden, they are using the clusters actually to support the companies, especially to the crisis. For instance, they are helping companies very concrete to fill in applications for governmental funding related to the pandemic, etc. Other things that we found very important is the platforms for cooperation, because as always, but even more now, it is extremely important that the cluster organizations have platforms that they can meet and exchange experiences, and they can discuss and talk how they will deal with the problems at the moment. We have a cluster program, the S3 pilot. We are gathering in about 20 clusters all around in Sweden, and they are all represented in the region's smart specialization strategies. And we also have the Windex program, well known here in Sweden. But we are working very much right now with the platforms. We have meetings nowadays it's digitally, but we have meetings 3 to 4 times per year, and we have also created a digital platform for for questions, exchanging ideas between cluster organizations and so on. And what we have identified that are very much uplifted is it's questions about globalizations. We have a new market, we have a new world, we have a new markets. It looks different right now. And digitalization, that the cluster organizations, they need to help the companies even more to be better in digitalization if they are going to be able to find new customers all around the world. And also, to be very concrete, an example is that to help the companies, the cluster organizations have seen that they need to help the companies to fill in the gaps in the value chain. For instance, to finding new suppliers. The old one are perhaps not there anymore because of the pandemic. So I would like to lift up 3 things, what's very important in the coming month. That's a platform, create that from a governmental level or foreign policy level, to create platforms for the clusters for exchanging ideas. It's also cooperation between clusters and also multi-level governance, cooperation between levels as well as between cluster organizations.
Thank you, Cecilia. Let's go to Hungary, to another national ministry. Peter, what can you tell us from your perspective? What is the main support that clusters will need in the coming months?
Hello everyone, Peter Keller. I hope that you hear me very well, because sometimes I have some difficulties with the voices. So I won't surprise anybody when I say that the COVID has been affected very negatively the economic players in Hungary as well. And it seems that this economic recovery needs at least 2 or 3 more years. And considering the tools and the type of the requested support, I think there is no big difference what the general entrepreneurial sector and the clusters and the cluster members need. The Hungarian Ministry of Finance has been implementing EU-financed economic development program in the period of 2014 and 20 with a budget of 8 billion euro. And in the framework of this program, we support various types of economic actors, including clusters. And of course, our program has a huge role to mitigating the negative effect of the COVID. And in my opinion, we must differ short-term actions and long-term actions what the clusters and other economic players need in the current period and next months. So starting with the short-term programs, we received 2 main requests from the Hungarian economic players. The first is be fast, and the second is be flexible. So fast, we introduced some tax reduction programs to the affected sectors, and we introduced very fastly programs which aims to preserving jobs, as you know, the short-term work scheme and Kurzarbeit. And regarding the flexibility, we have more than 20,000 supported business sectors who are implementing the project like technology modernization, R&D, cluster development. And in this period, in the past months, the next months, we introduced several administrative initiatives in order to have them. For example, extended the project duration. Instead of personal trainings, we accept online trainings. We increased the level of pre-financing rate in order to improve the company's financial situation. And at the special case of the clusters, we put the internationalization into the focus of our cluster program. So we are continuously helping them with accepting, for example, prolongation of their project in order to be able to participate in international
sorry, Peter,
events.
We cannot hear you well. Let's stop here,
Okay.
and I go to Mirjana in Australia. We try, meanwhile, to solve the problem and see in the second round we can follow you better. I could take the fast and flexible requirement that's important for the cluster support in Hungary. Thank you. Mirjana, from a place in Australia when you don't have a proper cluster policy, but you run a cluster support program, what do you think is the main support that clusters will need in the coming months?
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Patricia. So we've actually seen some interesting challenges ahead for some of the clusters in the food industry, which is the clusters that we are supporting and Patricia has highlighted. The first thing we've observed is there has to be a greater understanding of what their needs are and flexibility to accommodate the changing landscape and the new normal. For example, a requirement of all our clusters is to match the income that we provided for them. And that's become a real problem for clusters because companies aren't able to get about and therefore they cannot conduct activities to raise the cash to match our contribution. So one of the things that we've done to help our clusters through this very difficult period is to give them greater flexibility and in terms of the timeframes that they have to match our cash contribution, but also we're accepting in-kind contribution, which wasn't allowed prior to COVID-19. The second thing that we are doing to help our clusters at the moment is having regular contact with all the clusters in the food industry. And what we're doing is having fortnightly meetings, and what this is creating is a platform to share stories of what has worked well and also provide opportunities for connections where they can help each other in terms of addressing some of the challenges they're facing from one region to another. And as you can appreciate, Australia is a very large country. And so, for example, there's been stories of how displaced hospitality workers are actually being diverted within the cluster to another part of the cluster to help with on-farm labour shortage, which has been a real problem with the picking of agricultural produce, because overseas pickers cannot enter Australia. And the final thing that what we're doing to help our clusters at the moment is to promote the great work that they're doing and create the great work of their businesses in their clusters, to particularly with key influencers and supporters, to make sure they're aware of how they're helping their businesses, but also the communities. So, for example, one of our clusters in Tasmania, which is that little island that sits outside of Australia as the mainland, they're actually having a special dinner to promote the local food businesses, and they're having a focus on fermented and fermented products, which are matched by the finest bubbles from Tasmania. That's all I have to say, Patricia.
Thank you, Mirjana. Let's go to Germany. Rasmus, can you tell us what the main support for clusters in your region will be in the coming months?
Yeah, thank you. Of course I can. I think first of all, our main question in the Ruhr area, for example, we consist of about 53 cities and have about 400,000 companies. So of course we have many demands on our side. We are the economic development agency for this region. So my focus is not about what the cluster organizations or the clusters need. More or less, we have many single cases. For example, we have a good and very strong industrial core in our region. And as you can see, they are more or less on international, or they need in open and international markets. And due to Corona, they, of course, have lost competitiveness. So for us, it is very important. And for example, Cecilia and also Peter said that we should make platforms, and therefore we need also a little more help. We need new programs for building up platforms to connect clusters which could help each others, or where the companies which are in these clusters could come together on an over-regional level. I think therefore TCI is also very important, not to think that only in West Germany or Germany and the Netherlands. I think therefore we have learned to deal with digitalization and these tools and the companies also. So we should do that on an international level. And therefore, I think there could be, even in Europe, a new focus in cluster policies. Of course, I think the main challenge for the future is also for our industry to regain competitiveness. And it will also be a question about subsidies. For example, take the green transition. For example, the steel plants should work with hydrogen in the future. We need a lot of electricity to build up all these hydrogen. I would be happy if the hydrogen level is gray, but for example, green hydrogen, we need a completely new infrastructure in building up this amount of electricity, and therefore we need new subsidy programs on the European level. So to address all this, to coordinate this, to make the right linkages, I think therefore cluster organizations are very helpful, and therefore I think we have a lot of work to do. And on the other hand, in the last 5 or 6 years, when the economy was doing very well, I have met some people who said, oh, what do we need still cluster organizations? And I think now we have the proof of concept that cluster organizations are also in the future are very are a good address to tackle all these challenges.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rasmus. Let's move to the second question. What are the challenges ahead from a policy perspective? We start again with Cecilia.
Okay, I have a problem with my video. No?
We could see you, Cecilia, just a moment ago. Just
okay.
leave it and the technicians will, okay. There you are.
Yes, okay, right. Yes, what are the challenges ahead from a policy perspective? Yes, when it comes to the pandemic, Sweden has been very or quite affected. And we have a large organization at the Swedish Agency for Regional and for Economic and Regional Growth, or Tillväxtverket, where I work. And I think that we have doubled our organization. Actually, we have established so much many people here now who are working with the pandemic, and we are working with the companies. They can receive funding to avoid short-term layoffs. So it's really quite a big change here in our organization and in Sweden as well. And what can we learn from this? And resilience is quite the important word here, that we can be, hopefully we can learn something from this, and that we can be better prepared for unexpected issues in the future. But also we have to go on with other things as well. We have a big transition in the economy, and this is also a big it's a big challenge where the clusters have a big role. For instance, to support the companies to be more, climate friendly in the production, etc. And we will take that up in our next meetings in the S3 pilot, actually, to how they can support, how the cluster organizations can support the companies in this regard. Another thing, smart specialization. We are talking about the next program period here in Europe. Smart specialization is a very big umbrella for everything. And even here, the clusters have a big role. They are the region's extended arm when it comes to smart specialization. And especially for Sweden, we are quite a small country, 10 million inhabitants, but we have 21 regions. So they have all their smart specialization strategy of their own. So a big challenge for us is actually how can we how can we prioritize areas on a national level if we are going to do that? And the third one is actually that's also connected to smart specialization, competence supply. If we are going to be competitive in specific areas in the future, we have to have resources and competence for that. And that's also the third one I would like to lift up, and a very big issue here in Sweden.
Thank you, Cecilia. Let's move to Australia with Mirjana. What are the challenges ahead from a cluster support program?
Thank you, Patricia. So in Australia, as you're aware, we don't have support at a national level for clusters. But in Australia, we've also had some interesting challenges of late. Not only are we having a strong focus on COVID recovery, but we've had a horrendous year from Australia's Black Summer bushfires. We've had floods, and now we have a recession as well. So that means there are many initiatives and sectors that are competing for support from the government, and that poses many challenges. In line with this, what we're also seeing is that the loudest or the most influential voices are getting supported, and it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do for our country. Australia's just launched the Modern Manufacturing Strategy to support areas where we have either an advantage or it is a strategic priority for our country. And that poses some interesting challenges in my sector, where we have a large percentage of SMEs. Over 98% of the businesses are very small, and not everybody manufactures food. So this poses a real interesting challenge for what we are trying to do in terms of getting support for our clusters, or having a policy around that. So how do you stand out or make it attractive for government to support us? One of the things that we're doing is promoting the cluster principles of collaboration, of sharing and working together on a burning platform which businesses on their own could not resolve, and it would deliver benefit for many. We're also demonstrating the value of the initiatives that are being delivered through the clusters and how these are delivering benefits to their businesses, to their regions and communities. And just as an example, one of the things that we're seeing now, there is talk of potentially one of our clusters, the food clusters in Tasmania, there is discussion around the government supporting the establishment of a fermentation hub, setting up some massive investment in that region. So that's really great. What we're also seeing is a focus on regions. And so what we are trying to do is raise the profile of regions and demonstrating how, where there is market failure, how clusters can really help bring the small groups of businesses together and get that economies of scale around capacity and capability to achieve and address some of the challenges and chase the opportunities. But we also understand is that it does take time to embed the principles of clusters. And we have been on this journey for about 6 years in the food industry, and we believe the opportunity is now. So we are focusing now on pushing a policy change or getting a policy change, and we believe we can make it happen at the moment. So we are working really hard to raise the profile of how clusters can really help in market failure in Australia and really address some of the challenges, but also how we can navigate out of some of the challenges that are being presented to our industry at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirjana. I know it's late for you, so double thanks for being with us. Let's move to Rasmus. What are the challenges ahead, do you think, from a policy perspective?
Yes, I think from our side, we have now the new funding period in the European Union. I think there are two big topics. For example, we have the Green Deal, which has been formulated on the European level. And I think the big question is, everyone knows more or less, okay, Green Deal, it's about transition, it's about transformation. And I think it's all, from my perspective, it's all about the industrial transformation to a green economy, but we know that this is a big challenge, and I think for us as a region, it is very important to make the right links to specific. For example, all the companies are now thinking about how to transform their machines, how to invest, how could we use public money for that transition, and how does it work? when do we get the money and stuff like that. Very concrete questions. It's not about, I think the future policy making, politicians should do the policy making, but for us as an organization, it is very important to make the right linkages and to position our region in this European Green Deal. And if it comes more concrete, for example, in the coal and the energy production questions, we have this Just Transition Fund in the European Union, and for example, there is no linkage from our region to that funding program, and we work on it to position ourselves with a good program about how to regain competitiveness or to maintain competitiveness. And I think this is our main challenge. Another thing is to just keep our international connections alive. And I think we're going to have we can expect a long and dark winter with no traveling. And therefore, it is very important to make good platforms for more or less digitalized connections. I think these two things are our main questions. We should tackle these challenges, and that's from my side.
Thank you so much, the four of you. Sorry, Peter, but the sound was very bad, so we will skip you in this round. There are a lot of questions here, interesting questions. I suggest that we take them to a next debate in TCI, in the next gathering with members or a webinar or something, as we need to move forward now in the program. Thank you very much to everyone. Let's go back to the main room. Meet you there. Thank you. Why collaborative innovation is crucial in Denmark to tackle the green and digital challenges? How they challenge business to collaborate towards more innovation? Watch this video from Innovation in Denmark.
Er nogle af de mest innovative i verden. Et stærkt erhvervsliv er vigtigt for at skabe og udvikle et samfund og for den økonomiske vækst.
Innovation er virkelig vigtigt for Ørsteds forretning. Innovation er grundlaget for, at vi kan gå fra en sort energi til en grøn energi i vores forretningsmodel. Det har været innovation over tid, der har drevet kost af elektricitet ned til det niveau, det er i dag for Ørsted og for offshore vind generelt.
En af årsagerne til, at danske virksomheder er stærke og innovative, er Danmarks årelange fokus på at binde erhvervslivet, forsknings- og uddannelsesinstitutioner samt offentlige instanser tættere sammen for maksimalt udbytte af hinandens kompetencer og styrker. Samarbejdet understøttes af de danske klynger og innovationsnetværk.
Når vi inviterer enten virksomheder eller vidensinstitutioner rundt om det samme bord, så er det i virkeligheden der, vi får udfordret hinanden, som i høj grad gør, at vi sammen kan flytte os nogle andre steder hen.
Tallene viser, at virksomheder har 4 gange så høj sandsynlighed for at blive innovative sammenlignet med andre virksomheder, når de deltager i klyngernes aktiviteter. Faktisk opnår de en produktivitetsvækst, der er 3,6 procentpoint højere end lignende virksomheders vækst.
Gennem samarbejde med vidensinstitutionen får virksomheden adgang til den nyeste viden, men samtidig så får forskeren mulighed for at erkende nye forskningsspørgsmål, som man tager med sig hjem til forskningen, og dermed er det innovative samarbejde også med til at flytte forskningen fremad.
Hvert år søger over 18.000 danske virksomheder ny viden og samarbejdspartnere gennem klyngeaktiviteter. Danmarks fremtid skal skabes på innovation. Vi leverer innovationskraften.
Thank you all for this session on policy making. It's an important area for us in TCI. We always want to keep on learning and advancing on policy.